Today, we're going to dig into the invisible lines that connect some of the world's biggest conflicts. From the Middle East all the way to Asia, you've got these powerful rivalries that are creating this huge ripple effect of instability. We're going to break down how these crises, which seem totally separate, are actually all part of one big global story.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start with a look at the global chessboard, then we'll dive into the proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. After that, we'll explore Asia's really volatile borders, unpack this new great game between the US and China, and then, at the end, we'll tie it all together to show you how it's all one interconnected web.
So, to really get the big picture, we first have to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of the instability we're looking at right now.
I mean, just look at the Middle East. You've got at least 4 failing states: Yemen, Libya, Syria, and Iraq. And these are places where the government has pretty much lost control, creating these huge power vacuums that just fuel more conflict and, honestly, a ton of human suffering.
So you have to ask, right? Are these just a bunch of isolated, terrible events happening on their own? Or is there some kind of hidden engine driving all these conflicts, linking them together?
Well, to find that hidden engine, our first stop is the Middle East. This is where a really fierce regional rivalry is basically pouring gasoline on fires all across the region. So on one side, you have Saudi Arabia, which sees itself as the leader of the Sunni Muslim world and, of course, is a major U.S. ally. And on the other side, you've got Shia-led Iran, which built up its influence through this whole network of regional militias after its revolution back in '79. It's this epic battle for dominance that's fought along religious, political, and strategic lines. But here's the thing. These two powers, they almost never fight each other directly. Nope. Instead, they do something called proxy warfare. They fund and arm local groups to do the fighting for them. It's kind of like waging war by remote control, and the consequences for the countries that become their battlegrounds are just devastating.
And you can see this pattern everywhere. In Yemen, Syria, Iraq, it's the same story. Saudi Arabia and Iran back opposing sides, and they turn what might have been local conflicts into these huge regional catastrophes. They've even stepped in directly, like when Saudi Arabia sent troops right into Bahrain to crush a protest movement because they were afraid Iran was behind it.
All right, now let's shift our focus and head east. Over in Asia, you've got a whole different set of rivalries creating instability. Here you have these really old feuds that are getting way more complicated by a new, high-stakes geopolitical game.
I mean, just look at this map. This is an incredibly complex part of the world, where you have nuclear-armed powers like India, Pakistan, and China all sharing these contested borders. It creates a landscape that is just ripe for competition and conflict.
And one of the oldest and, frankly, most dangerous flashpoints is the rivalry between India and Pakistan. You've got rising nationalism on both sides that keeps tensions incredibly high, especially over the disputed territory of Kashmir. Politicians on both sides love to use it to rally support at home. For Pakistan, it's a real nightmare. It's a two-front security problem. You've got India on the east and all the instability spilling over from Afghanistan on the west.
And speaking of Afghanistan, right next door, the Taliban's return to power in 2021 created this massive power vacuum. And of course, that just sucked in all the regional powers who were looking to protect their own interests and maybe expand their influence a bit. So this power vacuum, it's become an arena for competition. You have Russia and China who decided to talk with the Taliban, hoping they could be a buffer against ISIS. India, on the other hand, was totally against that, because they were worried it would just make their rival, Pakistan, stronger. And at the same time, you've got Russia and China competing for influence in the neighboring Central Asian countries, with Russia offering military help and China offering cash.
So all of this brings us to the biggest rivalry of them all. I mean, this is the one that's really reshaping the entire global order, the escalating competition between the United States and China.
When you boil it all down, this is really an economic rivalry. For decades, American companies sent manufacturing jobs over to China. Well, now, the U.S. wants to rebalance things by forcing China to open up its markets. But for Beijing, that's a huge threat to its state-controlled economy and to the Communist Party's whole grip on power.
And to really force the issue, the U.S. has slammed tariffs on over $500 billion worth of Chinese goods. I mean, these are just staggering numbers, and they're designed to make Chinese imports way more expensive and push people to buy American. It's basically an attempt to decouple the two biggest economies in the world.
But let me tell you, this is not just a trade war anymore, not by a long shot. As China builds up its military on islands in the South China Sea, the U.S. is responding by sailing its warships through the area and beefing up its alliances. A big part of that is the Quad, a strategic partnership with Japan, India, and Australia, and it's all aimed at one thing: containing China's growing power.
Okay, so we've looked at conflicts in the Middle East, we've looked at tensions in Asia, and we've talked about the huge rivalry between the US and China. Now, let's connect the dots and see how a proxy war in Yemen can actually be linked to a trade war in the Pacific. Here's the key takeaway from all of this. None of these conflicts are happening in a vacuum. The Saudi-Iran Cold War, the India-Pakistan flashpoint, the US-China grape game, they are all interlocking pieces of a single, really fragile global system. A move in one part of the world creates ripples in another, and it makes the entire security landscape shaky and totally unpredictable.
And this leaves us with a final, and honestly kind of unsettling question. As all these rivalries get more intense and they pull more and more countries into their orbit, we really have to ask, in a world that's being pulled apart by all this competition, where does stability even come from anymore? Is this interconnected instability just the new normal?